Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Carly Pepin. Carly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather.
As a fellow mindset coach, I'm excited to have you on and share your perspective and lens. So please share with listeners what do you do and where do you live?
Yeah, so I'm a human behavior specialist and I live just outside of Los Angeles, California in the mountains.
What does it mean, human behavior specialist? What do you
Yeah,
really
so
hone in on?
awesome. So yeah, I really work with individuals whenever they're feeling stuck, stagnant, frustrated by current life circumstances. We start to get the clarity on what's going on, why it's occurring, to have a greater overview of, we talk about attracting things, but it's actually, it is part of our own creation, right? What are our misperceptions? What are our misperceptions and how we're supposed to move forward in life instead of connecting with who we really are? We find out where the gap is and then we shift the mindset around it. We work on undercovering limiting beliefs, we worked on misperceptions, and once you shift the mindset, we reconnect with the purpose dynamic of life so that individuals can move forward in their unique purpose and feel more inspired and alive by what they do.
Make it sound so simple. You know what
Mhm.
I love about that? Like change is simple. It's just not necessarily easy at first. So I actually want to let's start at the top and let's break it all down. So the word you used is stuck. And that's where I felt where I was, gosh, when was that? 2015, 2016. That's when I got my first coach, 2016. But I felt stuck. And that's where I see a lot of people. If you're not using the word stuck, unfulfilled, lacking motivation, stagnant, living in monotony. So can we kind of define what does it mean to be stuck?
It's more how we're feeling, right? Because what's funny is we'll say we're stuck, but then I could look at your life and all these different parts of life are moving. And so it's really to connect with you. It's like, well, where in my life am I perceiving this stuckness? Where do I feel stagnant, right? And it'll usually be like one, two, maybe three areas of life where you're like, this is where I'm feeling really frustrated, really stuck, really stagnant. And then other areas could be just moving just fine, like everything would be just fine. So what we do is then we want to identify what the specificities are around that. I remember like one client who came to me, they felt really stuck in their relationships and they felt like they kept attracting like partners and stuff that they weren't resonating with, that weren't committing. And it's like, well, let's find out why that's happening. And there's another one that I worked with who felt really stuck in their business, right? Like they just couldn't figure out how to get their business on the ground in a way that was inspiring like to them and get that launched and moving. So it's like, okay, let's figure out why you're stuck there and get you reconnected at the core of what your business is. And then there's like another individual and they're stuck in like, how do I move forward? How do I start this business? Who am I in this business? And that's where they're feeling stuck. So that's why I say it's like we're going to feel stuck in something that's really bothering us personally. And so once you identify like the area of life that you feel stuck in, it's then asking the deeper questions where what specifically around this area of life am I feeling stuck in?
Well, and you mentioned emotions, and I think of emotions as a check engine light. And what I see is, for example, when I do a discovery call with somebody, that's one of the things I ask, and I show the emotional guidance scale. So, listeners, this is something you can easily Google, but I show the emotional guidance scale, and I just ask them, name three emotions that you generally find yourself in. And generally, people find themselves in overwhelm, fear, doubt, worry, stress, boredom. So, can we talk about why those emotional states aren't helping them make forward progress?
Yeah. So when we get stuck in those dynamics, we're focused on the emotions as opposed to focusing on like the day-to-day actions that would actually like help us to thrive. Right. And so we can really get caught up in these emotional states depending on the level of emotional charge behind them. Sometimes we might be a little bit overwhelmed, but it's not so much that we just stop everything and say, I just need to stop, right? You're like, you're overwhelmed, but you move forward anyways. So it really depends on the level of the emotion that will actually cause a stuckness in your life to a certain degree. Although any emotion we have, I do agree with you on this one, it is feedback. Like emotions are a feedback mechanism to let us know that something in our internal system, something in our mindset, our perceptions is actually off. Because we don't have those emotions unless something genuinely is off within that internal system inside of us. So it's technically there to give us feedback. We often don't address the feedback because, I mean, this is not stuff that's like normal teaching in school, and we're learning so much more and more about it every day of our lives in modern day. So it's not really taught to us, but even now, since we have more of this opportunity, more of these tools, more of the ability to reflect, we can figure out why the emotions are present so we can actually transform them and they don't have to interact with us and impact us to the same degree.
So I love how, and I'm actually writing this down, how you said emotions are feedback. So would you say, for whatever reason, I'm imagining an iceberg right now. If emotions are the tip of the iceberg, our check engine
Mhm.
light, ooh, feedback. And if we don't have the results we want, it's feedback. Is what's below the surface our belief system and mindset? Is that what?
Yeah, the emotions are driven by the specific perceptions that we have. And when you shift the perceptions, the emotions actually disintegrate and you become more present, more poised, more balanced, grounded, you're inspired, right? You're grateful for life. And that's the cool thing about when we shift our emotions is behind that you have just a more balanced perspective of life and you're able to embrace and address things without having like the same level of volatility. Pretty cool. And so we have like two different sets of emotions that we can really lump everything into that we react and respond to. We react to things that challenge us, trigger us, charge us, that we resent, we're frustrated with, right? But we also react to things that we have a high level of infatuation with, right? So sometimes we don't see the things that we've labeled as almost overly positive as something that's challenging because we've been taught our whole lives that positive, 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 positive is good. But the truth is that there's two sides to every coin. You know, like it's amazing. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. They were like super stoked to be going on this road trip. And when I talked to them about where they were going in some like really dangerous areas of South America on their own on a bicycle, very expensive motorcycle as a single female. And I was like, let's reframe this. Like, I recognize that you're thinking of this as an all positive thing, and the emotion she's attached to is elation, infatuation. She's overexcited about it. And as a result, she's ignoring the challenges that come with doing what she's doing in certain areas that she was planning on going. And I was like, girl, like, let's talk. You're putting yourself in danger. So that's why even that emotion, when we get too high, too elated, too excited, also has some major drawbacks. And if we aren't paying attention to even that emotion, we're not actually paying attention to the other side of what's occurring and we're completely unprepared. That's why when we have situations where we maybe have mentors or individuals, partners, romantic partners, business partners that we see as all positive, and we're like, but I can't believe later on they did XYZ. Like, I'm so shocked that they did it. That person existed that way the whole time. You chose to only see that one side because you attached to those emotions of that elation, excitement, all this stuff. You chose not to see the other side, even though they showed it to you. And that means you came in completely unprepared. You felt sidewinded later on and just like it came out of the blue, but it was there the whole time. So that's why it's important to pay attention to both sides of our emotions.
So that's why I like the word you use, misperceptions. And can we get back to when somebody is feeling stuck and they're in the emotional states, frustration, impatience, doubt, worry, stress. Can we talk about what misperceptions and or limiting beliefs are actually fueling that emotional state?
Yeah, and this is where we do the internal check-in because there could be like so many different ones. There's when we think about a limiting belief, it's basically a belief that things are kind of all or none in our sense, right? It's all one way and this other way is not possible. And this again could swing on both sides of the fence where it's all positive and no negative is possible, which again is not true. Both are possible in life, or it's all negative and no positive is possible. Not true. Both are possible in life. So if you have this dynamic of almost an all or none, I mean, the world is just shades of gray. It's genuinely shades of gray. And so our misperceptions can latch on to this black or white instead of actually seeing where the shades of gray are, right? So whenever you have that, then we dive in and we do our reflective dynamic again, where it's like, let's start to ask ourselves quality questions about where our black and white perceptions are. A great thing to just even pay attention to is I love to use words as tools because our language and our dialogue will genuinely show us where we have black and white perceptions, which is a misperception. We'll consistently use the word always or never. Like we'll say it's always this way, never that way, never this way, always this way, right? But that shows me that that's only seeing one side. And again, the world is in shades of gray. 8 billion people on this planet, so many different cultures. I could find a shade of gray no matter what you bring up. I could find the culture, find the place in the world where the shades of gray exist. And that culture is very happy, very, like they're thriving. They love their life. No matter what you think, they like their lives, right? Because it's not up to us to say like what's right or wrong according to someone's culture, their beliefs, their background, their dynamic. We could have our opinions, but the truth is that they're functioning societies that are, really also thriving and enjoying things. And we have people in our societies that don't enjoy like life. And so it's like, there's your shades of gray, like it exists everywhere. So when we have the always or never, it's like, it's time to find exactly what that always and never is about, because those are where we want to shift the perception to shift into those shades of gray. And the shades of gray, by the way, that's a state of gratitude. Because when we can see that something's always this way or never this way, and we can shift that, we become grateful because we get to experience ourselves and the world in its entirety. And the amazing thing is, you can't not be grateful for that when you just connect with what's real instead of this like frustrating. And there is like a frustrating energy behind the always and never. It's almost like that black and white that we have to live by. And that's hard. That's hard for people.
I want your perspective and lens because a pain point that comes across a lot or I get DMs about is I'm not motivated. How do I get and stay motivated? And I always
Yeah.
preach, which apparently I need to figure out a better way to say it, but I preach that motivation is not your problem.
Mhm.
But people think I'm just not motivated. So can we help them understand what's really going on?
For sure, because I definitely agree with you. Motivation is not the problem, it's what you're focusing on. So, for example, if you sat here and asked me right now, like, what is important to me, right? I can spout out all the things that are important to me. And I could tell you that this whole summer, I have been procrastinating on fixing my deck my whole summer, and I'm not motivated to do it. I am not inspired to learn how to do that. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I find it takes up a lot of time and energy. I see no value or purpose in it. Does that mean it has no value and purpose? Absolutely not. But it doesn't to me. And that's the important dynamic. It does to someone else who I've now hired to assist and get that done. And they like it and they're enjoying it. And they actually enjoy spending the time doing that. I'm not motivated to do things that are not fulfilling to me. And this is not a unique thing just in me. This is every person on the planet. So if you're feeling like you're disconnected from something, it genuinely isn't that important to you. What can often happen in this dynamic is we can fall into these crazy judgments of it should be important to me. It's supposed to be important to me. It needs to be important to me. According to who? Again, 8 billion people on this planet. Everyone has a different purpose. Everyone has a different life, which means everyone has like similar-ish, but pretty different perspectives on all these different things. And you're telling me that that needs to be involved in your life. No way. So if you actually aren't enjoying it and it's not important, you're allowed to drop it. You don't have to do it. Like you genuinely don't. And reconnect and pay attention to, because every time you're not motivated to do one thing, you're taking that time and energy and you're filling it with something else that you'd rather do. That's what's more important to you. And that thing or things that you're doing is connected to your deeper why. The more you can reflect on the deeper why behind why you're doing things, the more you're going to get connected to that inner inspiration, that intrinsic drive that requires no motivation. And the more details you get on those little dynamics, you're going to be able to understand what to focus your time and energy on that you won't procrastinate on. That you don't need me or Heather or anyone else on this planet to wake up every day and motivate you, where no matter what, you're going to do it, no ifs, ands, or buts. So it's really a true understanding of who you are. And there's already areas of your life that you're doing it. And this is the thing that I love about this dynamic. It's your life's already demonstrating it to a certain degree. Every day you're waking up and you're doing something and nobody needs to motivate you to do it. What are those things? Because those are the things that you love. Those are the things that are important to you. And how can you create a life around that, whether you're working in businesses that give you the opportunity to engage in that on a day-to-day basis, or you're creating your own business that gives you the opportunity. That's the great thing about our planet and our world is we do have limitless opportunities there. If you're doing it and you love it, there's a job out there that can help you do it every day, or you can create a job.
Well, and I think what's really going on for those who lack motivation, number one, you might have been chasing somebody else's definition of success that's not in alignment with your values or your interests. So, of course, you're not motivated. Or you lack motivation because you don't have clarity and purpose for where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, when we follow someone else's dreams, that's when the shoulds, supposed tos, need tos, have tos come in. And what's funny is if you look at all the things you're not motivated to do, I guarantee you, right alongside that is your brain's going to say, I should do it. I need to do it. I'm supposed to do it. And this is why, again, this is like when I think about tools, it's like, let's ask the quality question. According to who? Like I should, according to who? Because that's the person that you made an authority in your life, which is another misperception. You've made that person an authority to such a degree that now you're saying, if I don't live my life similar to them, my life is not enough, right? That's how extreme those authority figures become in the subconscious mind. And so it's really wisdom when you're not motivated to do something, you're not getting it done. Ask yourself the question, like, I should do this according to who? And you'll be surprised by the answer that comes up because you'll realize, yeah, like I'm making an assumption that because they're doing it, that's the way I was supposed to be because they were successful in this way, or, I admired them for this, or maybe it's a parent or something that you just had telling you this was the way life is for so long. So it's like pay attention to that according to who, because that's going to give you that dynamic of who you've made an inner authority within your conscious and unconscious mind.
So here's what I want to have you do. Since we're talking about that idea of feeling stuck and misperceptions, and that's what's creating our reality, you have a process or a framework, to create clarity, mindset, and purpose. I'd love for you to walk us through what that
Mhm.
looks like so people know what's on the other side of when you're fulfilled and you're living on purpose and like intrinsically motivated. How do you get there?
Yeah. So when we think about clarity, we want to create the clarity in the sense that, when you're feeling stuck, when you're procrastinating, when you're feeling frustrated and stressed, you do feel a level of confusion because it's like, why is this happening? How do I get to the other side? And our brain is a problem solving machine. It genuinely is. And so you'll ruminate on this for days, weeks, months, years, decades sometimes, trying to solve the problem in your head, right? So the important thing about getting clarity is first we want to get clarity on what's occurring, why it's happening, like why this challenge in this specific way has come up for you now, right? We want to get clarity on that. That's going to help even the driving factors of that noise in the brain to start to calm down and slow down. We then work on shifting the mindset, and we want to shift the mindset because if we keep focusing on trying to solve the problem in the same way where it hasn't been solved quite yet, then it's not going to get shifted and it's not going to get changed. So we want to transform the mindset to be able to look at it from a different light, a different perspective. And that's taking the emotions out of it. So we work to actually ask these questions to ensure that any emotions that are attached to this specific dynamic are removed. And once you remove the emotions and it's not about the feeling and the fears and like the infatuation and the fantasies and the nightmares, you become incredibly objective, right? So after the mindset component, we get objective and then we can focus on purpose. And this is the fun part is like then since you're objective, there's no emotions, no fantasies, no nightmares. All of a sudden, we're objectively able to ask quality questions to find out how you can actually transform and solve this problem, how you can move forward. And sometimes this is the amazing part too, is when you get rid of the emotions, you look at it and you'll say, I actually see that I thought this was a major issue, but this is perfect the way it is now. Like I don't really even need to change it. Like what I once labeled as an issue, I see is serving me. And I don't need to change this. I'm just going to let it run its course the way that it's meant to. It's kind of amazing how we can transform that. And sometimes you're objective in a different way and you're like, okay, cool. Like this is what's going on in business. I'm super challenged. I'm not emotional anymore. So now I can see this is exactly what my next step is. Okay, now I know what to do. I know my next step. I know what steps to take, and this is where I'm going to go. Right. So that's why we want to be getting to that objective center, but we can't get to the objectivity and connecting with that deeper purpose and meaning, which is inspiring, by the way, because then we love solving our problems. That also feels good to us as human beings. We get that clarity, we shift the mindset, and then we dive into the purpose, the objectivity. And what I love about that too is the state of how you're feeling. You're feeling more inspired, you're feeling less triggered, you're feeling less emotional, you're feeling more alive, you're feeling more engaged in your life, right? So that's what I love to have people feel and experience is a deeper level of engagement in their life, what's important to them, and facing the challenges that are inspiring to them. Not running away from them, but feeling comfortable, more and more comfortable facing challenges that are inspiring to them so they can continue to grow and evolve, like what is important to them.
I want to ask some clarifying
Mm.
questions around emotions.
Okay.
I would never want somebody to think experiencing an emotion is a bad thing. Again, you say
No.
emotion is feedback. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it's getting rid of, but is it more about transmuting,
Yeah.
alchemizing emotions? Can you explain that?
For sure. Like we'll transmute them, but you'll never get rid of them. And so we might transmute them over a specific challenge. So, for example, maybe you have something, with a romantic partner, and I know this happens quite frequently, and you can't get this out of your head because it's so frustrating, and you're at work, and all you can think about is, oh, I have to go home and I have to like talk to my partner, and I don't want to deal with this again. So, if I transmute the emotions around that specific thing, right? And I can show you the deeper meaning, the purpose behind it, help you become more objective. Your partner can do the exact same thing and you won't react to that. So, that service to you is just getting that brain noise out of your head, making you less emotionally volatile. You're not fearing going home after work. You want to connect with your partner to a greater degree, you want to engage with them. So, that's how it can shift that dynamic. However, you're still human. It's not to say that your partner in the next month, in the next like 3 months, in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, they are going to bring new things to the table. You are a purpose driven human being. And whenever we perceive that something around us and our purpose, and this is a perception, whenever we perceive it's being challenged, what we're going to do is we're going to become reactive. So there's all these different things that we get to work through as human beings, and for me, it's just one step at a time. I can. I was laughing with this about one of my clients the other day because she's like, I feel like we're working on this, but there's so much and this never ends. And I was like, you're accurate. And I was like, but what we want to focus on is the highest emotional charges, the things that are the most evident in your life, because those are the things that your emotions are saying, work on this now. This is the priority. And so when you clear one and transmute around one thing, and then the next thing pops up, guess what? That's the priority. And again, we are evolving human beings. We're not here to stay stuck and stagnant and still. We're evolving. And that includes not just external involvement, but internal, like evolvement. So that dynamic of emotions is just showing us like the different stages of our own evolution. And each emotion is going to point and help you be a guiding light on like the next thing to work on. So it's like, yeah, when someone comes with a high emotion or something, sometimes they say sorry, and I'm like, don't be sorry. I was like, we're super clear. Like, this is great.
That's okay. So what I
Uh,
hear you saying then it's more talking about like the charge or the trigger behind the emotion.
yes.
We diffuse that. That's what frees and liberates us to evolve.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
the emotion is just tied to each different charge and trigger. And the emotions are like, we don't have that many emotions. Like we don't have that many emotions, happy, sad, frustrated, angry. Like frustrated, angry, it's all like kind of the same, right? Where we're crying, we could be yelling, we can be happy, right? Feel depressed. Like they're all sort of grouped into basically these happy, sad components. And so each trigger that we have, those have a very large multitude. Like there's so many different triggers that could happen to kind of make this either overly happy or overly sad kind of pop through. So it's more, all right, well, I'm sad today. Well, what's the thing that's actually triggering the sad? And that's the thing that you work through. And then that thing, once you actually fully clear it, doesn't have to trigger the sad anymore. But it doesn't mean you're going to get rid of sadness. Sadness is beautiful too, by the way. It's like you're able to connect, you're able to experience, feel like it's life. Like, I'm not here to make you get rid of any parts of yourself. Like, everything is necessary.
The word I just wrote down is it's about being curious. And so even me, when I
Mhm.
get triggered, I'm like, oh. oh, it's like, what's the gift? What's the lesson? And if we don't, which most people suppress
Hmm.
because it's uncomfortable and it's all that years of suppression, which creates big problems. But emotions, I don't know if this is true, but I heard this recently that emotions only have a 90-second lifespan.
Hmm. That I actually don't know. It's possible. Yeah. I'm like, some of mine lives a little longer.
I think the point is that emotions only have a short lifespan,
Uh,
but it's our attention and
yeah.
those thought patterns that keep them ongoing.
Yeah, and this is fun too, guys, because I'm human. I totally have emotions, and I'm also Italian, so they're expressed differently than other people in their emotions. So yeah, when we have that emotion and there's like a certain level of connection to it, it's why we can say we have emotional reactivity in this one specific thing. And what's kind of crazy is like if you have emotions and you let's say you're like I am emotional, right? Well, like go and look at what the specificities are around it and you'll find you're not actually emotional. Sometimes you're emotional and sometimes you're not, but there's going to be very specific triggers for you that are pulling emotions out. And yes, when the triggers are running in the conscious unconscious mind on a regular basis, the emotions will continue to run. And so that's why it's kind of fun. Like we have the opportunity to diffuse it. And the other things, I know we were talking about this a little before we started as well, is like when you get to diffuse that, you see the world in a different light, right? Like, so it's not just that, like, when we're only focused on that one emotion, we see the world through that lens. And then when we diffuse it around this one particular topic and trigger, the whole world opens up in a new way. And all of a sudden, you're seeing things that technically were always there. Like, the world is there and it exists as it is. But when you open your eyes to the rest of the story, the rest of the event, the rest of that dynamic, you shift that perception, you take the blinders off. And in that, it's like your world opens up. Because they say when like what is it? When the why is big enough, the how falls into place. This is bullshit. It's 100%. When the why is big enough, you'll figure out the how. When the why is big enough, you want to shift your perceptions. You want to see the world in as many ways as possible. And this kind of goes back to the motivation purpose dynamic. When your why is big enough, you do whatever it takes to make it happen. The how never falls into place. It's not going to just fall in your lap. You make it happen because the why is so big and so important. And that's why it's like it goes back to the motivation part. I don't need to motivate someone when their why is big enough. I just show up and help them clear triggers and charges so they can keep moving forward in a more balanced, grounded state. But when their why is big enough, I know that every time I get on the phone with someone, I don't have to check in with them to see if they like did anything. I'm just like, where are you at now? What happened this week? So it's like get that why because then you make the how happen. It doesn't fall into place. That's all you. You're the creator.
All right, so
Mhm.
I come from a very different lens, and I have a little rebuttal to that one. So I'm
That's
just,
cool.
this is
Let's
just for
do it.
fun. I'm curious. So you definitely emphasize that when you have a strong why, and so some people talk about when you have clarity and purpose, but that why, your driver, it
Yeah.
sounded to me kind of like when you know that, the how is up to you, that you have to be doing and efforting and taking action, which I don't
Mhm.
disagree with.
Yeah.
However, I also come from the train of thought that like when I get clear on the what, that I don't always know the how, but if I stay in
Mhm.
alignment with the what and I take the inspired action, like I'm inspired to create content or a video, then that quote, how a resource or an opportunity
Mhm.
or something will actually come my way, that it's not
Mhm.
me making the how happen. So, what do you say to that?
I think what I'm going to include kind of what you shared earlier with an inspiring post that you shared, which are like, I don't know where it came from, but I got all these responses from it. And you're like, but it just was something that I felt like I wanted to write. And this it gives me goosebumps when we talk about it. That's your intuition. Like, and so even that is you making it happen because your intuition came through and you listened to it. And when you're why and you're connected to that why and you're connected to that strength, you're connected to your intuition, which sometimes just tells you to like do stuff that you're like, I don't know why this, I don't know, it doesn't make sense, but I'm just going to do it. And then you do it, and all these doors and opportunities open, and it feels like magic, right? And what's truly occurred in that state is you're connected to what's important to you. As a result, that little voice of your intuition is loud enough and you're listening to it because you've taken the time and you've invested in ensuring that you know your why and you're listening to that intuition. You put it out in the world and then it responds accordingly. It's really cool. So I kind of love how you shared that because that like ties into when we're focused on that why, we're more able to listen to our intuition and get the shoulds out of our head. So instead of you sitting down and being like, well, I should write a post like this, you're like, I want to do this. I'm going to put this out. This is what I'm inspired to do. This is what I feel called to do. And that's you listening to intuition, which again comes from connecting with that deeper purpose, connecting with that deeper why.
Here's what I want to ask. Can you
Hmm.
walk us through a real world example, whether it's you or a client or whatever,
Hmm.
but somebody who came, had the misperceptions and lacking clarity and definitely don't have the right mindset. Can you walk us through a real world
Hmm.
example from that space into having the clear vision and the changed mindset, the changed perceptions and the emotional diffusing? What's that look like before and after?
Yeah, for sure. And so a great example, like I was working with someone and they actually started with me on business and relationships is what they wanted to focus on. We focused on business first because that was just their higher priority. And they're married. So we focused on business first. So as we started to focus on business, they were really confused on how to move forward, not just in business, but finances. And they knew they had like this financial goal. And they're like, they kept saying, I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like I'm missing something and I'm just stuck. And like, I can do it. I just don't know how. Right. And it was interesting because you see them tear up when they say it. Right. And as adults, like we tear up because it's like, I just can't find it. Like there's something missing. So we started in the beginning to go through kind of like a deserve factor first. And we started to dive into the different dynamics of why this individual perceived maybe they didn't deserve the finances that they thought they could have, right? And we went through all these different perceived traumas from the past, challenges that they've inflicted on others that they've really been hard on themselves for to such a degree that they're like, well, I don't deserve it because I did XYZ. And it's like, well, let's go work on that. Let's shift your perception, right? Because it's life. We all do things. We all challenge people. There's no person on this planet that doesn't give someone else like a hard day, and sometimes even a hard week, a month, a year, depending on like what occurred, right? So to sit there and hold yourself back from building wealth and all areas of life is crazy. So that's what we started working on. After that, we kind of shifted that dynamic to reconnecting them more to their purpose and their deeper why in business. And then once we kind of got locked onto that and the deeper why in business, it's really been ever since then growing and evolving that. So every time a challenge comes up that really gets in the way of the business, is really frustrating them, they're having a hard time with, it could be like an employee, it could be a dynamic even in the market or something. We go work on it to get an objective viewpoint of how all of these challenges are helping them and how they can utilize it objectively to help them move forward. And they've done an amazing job with this. This is someone who's been like really dedicated. So they've taken a company that was at about 10 million in the beginning and it's about 60 million now, and they want to keep growing and evolving it. And they have that vision now. So they're dedicated and they have the clear path. So that's beautiful. We also went into the dynamics of relationships as well, because there was a shift in the relationship after a certain period of time. Beautiful couple, beautiful marriage, shift in the relationship after, like 2 decades. And it was like, okay, how do we get you guys reconnected again? So it was an interesting dynamic because there's also an unrealistic expectation. It's like, oh, we're just gonna be all romantic and just get reconnected. That's not how it works. It's an ebb and flow. So there's connection, disconnection, connection, disconnection, connection, disconnection, and going through all those different dynamics until they could really reconnect with who they were. Both of them had really lost sight of themselves as individuals. And as a result, they were worried that the other wouldn't appreciate and accept it. And when we could just get them appreciating and accepting and loving their own dynamics, their own authentic self, and reintegrating into that, I didn't even like have to work on them coming back together as a couple. That's the people that they fell in love with the first place. And then they just reconnect in that state, right? Because that's who they fell in love with. It wasn't a facade, it was the authenticity. So when we just get both of them to be authentic again, it was like a reconnection. And now they're just back to like living life as themselves and a couple together. So that was fun. Yeah. So that's genuinely, even when I do relationships, that's often what I'll focus on is when people fall out of relationships, we don't fall in love with like a facade. It's rare that we do. Sometimes we do, but it's not really love. It's an infatuation. You infatuate with facade, but we really truly fall in love and connect with authentic people and that authentic individual. So if there's a disconnect in that, it's like, all right, well, let's get you guys back home. Let's get you back home. And then if that still spark is there, you'll reconnect naturally. And if it's not there, you'll probably disconnect, but actually with more love and gratitude instead of like,
Would you say this transformation journey is kind of like it's that waking up and a self-awareness, like getting out of autopilot, the monotony, and becoming self-aware and doing the introspection, and that's how we create the transformation?
yeah, and it's the specific, it's funny because it's the specific autopilot of the shoulds, the have tos, the need tos, right? So we are in, and this is normal in our society. We are an autopilot and I should do this. I should be this way. I have to do it this way. I need to, right? That is an autopilot mode because we're taught growing up so many different ways that this is the way it has to be. 8 billion people on the planet, so many different cultures. Again, if you don't like it this way, go find a country and a culture that suits you. I guarantee it. Like, or a city or a state. Like, there's just so many options. So many options. So it's like, okay, instead of thinking it has to, need to, should, it's like, let's find out what is really important to me and what I love. Let's find out what fuels me, what inspires me, what helps me. And again, sometimes you are going to be finding the places in the world that match that dynamic, that fit that dynamic. It's a reason why I love LA. Like LA just fits what is important to me. Like LA just it suits me in that way. So it's a place that I keep calling home and I keep going home to. No matter where I go in the world, I just keep coming home there because that's what it does. It feeds that part of my soul. So it's like find out who you are, you find the places that like create and help that, the people that help and create that. And then that's where you turn on autopilot. It's not an awful thing to be on autopilot on an inspired mission. Because if you're on autopilot and every day you wake up and you are working towards what you think you're destined to do and you make that autopilot, you're going to be so inspired. If you're on autopilot on like trying to like do shoulds and have tos, you're going to be miserable. And I know that we can reflect even if you have a life that's like more even filled with what you love. You can even reflect on the times when you tried to focus on the shoulds and the have tos where you're like, yeah, that felt like crap. And if you're stuck in those shoulds and have tos, you'll sit there and you'll listen to this and you'll say, this does feel crappy. Like, I don't like how I feel. I don't feel like alive. I don't feel what you're talking about. So it's like we have the autopilot dynamic. Let's utilize it to our benefit. Let's transfer it to something that fuels us, inspires us, and helps us to feel the most alive, the most fulfilled. And then all of a sudden, the tool that was really challenging for you before is now your best friend.
You shared with me, I asked you a billboard
Mhm.
message you want to share with humanity, and you said, and change it to your words, but something to the effect of you already have inside what it takes. Can you explain
Yeah,
what that means? Because wait,
for
sorry to
sure.
interrupt. Because I think
Yeah,
what
it's
happens
okay.
is most people were so conditioned to seek externally, trying to find when it's been with you all along.
The whole time. Everyone at every age, like we all have all these different dynamics and parts that we're admiring. You may look at a speaker and admire a speaker, and you might say, well, I'll never speak like that. I don't know how to speak like that. And I was just doing this with someone the other day because she's transitioning into a business where she's going to be doing more speaking. She's going to have a podcast. It's fun. I got to be on her first podcast. It was so fun. And she's an amazing speaker when she's focused on something that's inspiring. I can have every person who's listening to this right now think about times when they couldn't shut up. They couldn't stop talking about something. They were in the flow, and like they could just go on this topic for hours and hours and hours. That is you as a speaker. What were you talking about? What were you connecting on? What was it that fueled you and fired you up so much? Because all that you're doing, all I'm doing on a podcast is I'm taking what I can talk for hours and days on, and I'm finding people that match that. And like, I mean, Heather and I were talking about it when I read her. podcast and she read mine. I was like, this is such a match. Like, I feel like we're just gonna go on for days. Like, this is a match. But that dynamic right there is where I'm a great speaker. If I look at a podcast and I look at the description of what they're saying and I say, I don't know what I would talk about there, that's when I would get on and I would be really talking slow. I would say, uh, trying to find answers. I feel really uncomfortable and out of place because I'm not talking about something that I know that inspires me. So every person on this planet is a speaker at every age, every age, even kids do it. And every part of you that you see that you think you're missing is in you in a form that's maybe different than you saw it in someone else. The artist that you see that creates, you go to a museum and you see the beautiful paintings. I just went to Paris in April and it was so fun because I was going through just all the different impressionist artists. They had a really beautiful exhibit at the Musée d'Orsay, and they were just talking about how all these individuals would get together and they would share all their ideas and they would play with each other's different methods. And this is like, okay, this is when, Pizarro was trying so and so's, and this is when Monet was trying so and so, and Van Gogh was trying so and so. And you could see the different types of art and how it like transformed. You know what we're watching? We're watching people playing with each other, learning from each other in like a mastermind situation. And so you're going to tell me that you haven't done that before? You're not creative with like friends or family members or like other colleagues or something, and you guys haven't sat and mastermind to like try different things and try to implement them and see what works and see what doesn't. You're the same as the masters. It's just breaking it down to see how you do it in your form. You might not put a paintbrush to a canvas, but like, what is your canvas? What does that look like? And then when you see that, you're like, there's nothing missing inside me. It's been in me the whole time. It's just for me to express it in my own form because I thought it had to be this way. That's the should. When you get that should out of your brain, you go embrace your form in your way, and you get to be the master that you already are. It's already in there.
I'll share like a
Mhm.
real quick personal example to bring this full circle.
Yeah.
As a little girl, I always wanted to be a teacher. Like I loved school, loved it. But then I found out, they didn't make any money. So in college, I got a very generic degree and then I got another degree and I climbed the corporate ladder because that's what I was believed I should be doing. The American dream, right? So I chased it for a decade, not happy, not fulfilled. And then when I broke free of that, which I believe takes some courage to break free, right? And let life kind of lead me. I've gotten into a teaching role in which I get to nerd out on mindset and manifesting and consciousness and spirituality and all these different things that I literally could do for days, uh, like no problem. So what you're talking about is our zone of genius and what lights you up, and whatever that is, go do more of it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a beautiful example is that no matter what, you're the teacher and it's just coming through in your unique form.
Right. From my life
Yeah.
experiences, yes. Here's what I want to ask you. I love to know different people's daily rituals and practices. So what are some of your, and I call that rituals, not routines, but what are some of your daily practices that you do to keep you
Mhm.
mindful and intentional and moving forward?
Yeah. So I very certain on what's uniquely my why, very certain. And every day there's very specific components about that I integrate and make sure that I'm doing on a daily basis. Days when I'm not doing that, I don't do well. I'm frustrated, I'm bored. It's like almost like cause problems for the sake of causing problems because I'm like, I got to do something. So I really focus on creating inspiring challenges for myself daily. I also have like a high value on fitness. So even the fitness dynamic is something that I will make sure that I incorporate daily. I'm pretty jam-packed back to back today, but at the same time, part of the reason I'm jam-packed back to back because I refuse to give up yoga class and I refuse to give up walking, right? So I'm like, I'm not gonna not do it. And then I'm also making like my healthy dinner in my crock pot. And I was like, you can do all of it. So all of this is stuff that I'm inspired to do. I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't feel exhausted because it's things that I genuinely love. And it's mixed in with business, it's mixed in with connection, like with my partner, connection with my family, everything that's important. Find the things that are really important to you and figure out how every day to incorporate and schedule it in. Even having like those long-term goals, the long-term mission, all the things that I'm doing today, being on this podcast, working with some individuals. I did some studying and stuff as well this morning, which I love. But that all is achieving, it's going to help me achieve those long-term goals because when I know that I'm making even tiny little steps towards them, it feels really fulfilling. So yeah, really focused on those dynamics. And I highly suggest it. You'll feel better just immediately. Anyways, yeah.
Well, I think this is a good segue to bring
Mhm.
it full circle. We talked about a lot today and emphasize things that individuals can do. What do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
Yeah, really uncover what is important to you. It's like a reason for living. In a long time ago, it started out as a study of axiology. It's the value and worth, the meaning we place on our life. Because if we connect with the things that are the most meaningful for us, we have a meaningful life. Every time you experience something that you're connected to that has meaning and purpose, you feel like it's a more meaningful moment. So why not understand that to a greater degree and give yourself permission to create a life around it? I mean, you gave a great example where it's like now I get to teach in a way where I'm so excited, I'm inspired, I nerd out, I get to do what I love every day. Like, why not give yourself permission to do that as well? But the first thing to do to be able to uncover that is to uncover you because you can't understand and connect with that meaningful part if you don't know what it is. So it's like, look, and we talked about this, listen to it again, because we talked about it, is find out and look where you're already prioritizing things. You already feel that energy come through. You already do those things. You love it. You're not procrastinating on it. It's something that inspires you, fuel you, it energizes you. Your life's already going to be showing you evidence of those things that do that for you. And then you start to ask the question, all day, every day until you figure it out. How can I create finances out of this? How can I create an inspiring life around this? Keep asking until you get the answers.
Isn't that I think it's a Japanese thing, the ikagi?
Yes, I think it's the ikigai, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I read it like a bunch of books and stuff. It was really inspiring. Yeah.
It just, I feel like that brought it full circle. What do I love? What do people need? What am I good at?
Yeah. Which is business, by the way. That's like the core foundation of when you have a business product or service. It's what do I love? What am I good at? What product or service does that become? And who needs that? That's like marketing. So it's funny, like when you tap into that thing, that's just the next questions you can ask if you want to turn into a business. Huh.
All right, for time's sake, not that I am done, but I'd love to ask you questions to wrap up the interview.
Okay, go for it.
What is a quote or motto that you live by?
What is a quote? Take no credit, take no blame, just keep focused on your chief aim. BJ Palmer, father of chiropractic. And I love that because basically he's saying we don't need to be puffed up. We don't need to put ourselves down, right? So it's not about being high, it's not about being low. Like just focus on your mission, focus on that purpose. I love that.
I've never heard that. Love it. What
Yeah.
is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend in what we talked about today?
Yeah. What would be, let me see, what would be the one? I'm reading a couple books. It sort of picks them up. But one that I would recommend that we talked about today would be The Values Factor by Dr. John Demartini. So The Values Factor by Dr. John Demartini, I love him. He's a mentor friend of mine. It's got a great questionnaire in there, which helps you in the values and the axiology department to help you identify a lot of what we're talking about today so that you can get more clear on what's inspiring and meaningful to you. So that one would be really helpful.
He also has a quiz on his website for those listening
Yeah.
that you can take it. 100% that is worth your time. All right,
Yes, it is.
question. What advice would you give your younger self?
You got this. Everything's good, and you'll understand why later. Yeah.
Carly, I loved this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah. Thank you too. This was inspiring.